here? Okay. Well, I am going to run through the notes that I posted on the French Revolution and Napoleon, which actually should not take us very long. So hopefully, you will not have to be here too long with me today. I appreciate the people that did show up. If you're looking at your first note sheet there that says the French Revolution, says study guide for the French Revolution, we'll roll through that and then we'll do a little bit of Napoleon. I'll spend more time with the French Revolution because Napoleon, I would be absolutely shocked if this DBQ that they're going to give you is going to have something to do with like Waterloo or, Napoleon's personal life or all the things that we spent time on with Napoleon. It'll probably be like Napoleonic Code, Congress of Vienna, how it plays into other things. So I'll fly through Napoleon pretty quick, but I'm not going to do like Josephine and, all that kind of stuff. It's just a waste of our time. So looking at those French notes, let's begin with the motto of the French Revolution, and that is liberty, equality, and fraternity. So if you've got those notes out in front of you, just make sure that part's highlighted there. This is the credo for the French Revolution, so just keep that in mind. We're looking at the origins of the French Revolution. We really have a couple issues. First and foremost is money. Louis XIV bankrupts the French Empire, and then his grandson Louis XV is even going to drive the empire further into the ground with the 7 Years' War loss and mismanagement of the finances overall. So, when Louis XVI comes in, he is dealing with a country that is in significant debt and makes the debt worse by backing the Americans during the American Revolution. So the number one reason that the French Revolution is going to happen is money. Now, if we had to pick a second, then that would probably have to do with the estate system. If you remember, we had 3 estates, first, second, third estate. And the third estate makes up over 90% of the people in France. But they only get 1 vote in the Estates General. So, if the nobles and the clergy, which are the first and second estate, decide to vote against the third estate, then there's nothing they can do, which essentially gives control of the country to the wealthy. So that's certainly another factor for the French Revolution. And then the last one, which, is the DBQ, is the Enlightenment. You've got this movement where people are saying, like, don't listen to authority, challenge everything, challenge religion, challenge science, challenge government. And France is really gonna be the first to experiment with that, where you've got Enlightenment figures like Voltaire and Rousseau and even their counterparts like Locke and Hobbes, all these ideas, Bacon, all these ideas are coming out, and the French Revolution is really the kind of the manifesting of those ideas, where it's going to need to go in the long run. So those are the couple of factors on why the French Revolution is going to start. Just know the middle class is called the bourgeoisie. That could certainly play in. And also that the monarch and the nobility are sometimes known as the ancient regime. That's not a term that I use often in my class. But on the notes, it's on the notes. And if they do it on the test, and they say, what's the effect of the ancient regime, on, poor people in Europe from such and such a time? The ancient regime is just the nobles, king, nobility, that whole system that's been there for some time is the ancient regime. So I just wanted to mention that. I saw that in the notes. I'm like, I don't know if I really mentioned that. So now getting into the actual, revolution itself. Louis XVI, very incompetent king. He really can't make any decisions. His wife, Marie Antoinette, certainly is not helping the situation out with her let them eat cake and all this other stuff. The only guy that's really, preaching any type of reason during this initial phase of the French Revolution is Necker, who is Louis's finance minister. And although we went through a bunch of finance ministers, Brienne and a couple other guys, Maupois, Necker is certainly the most important. He's going to be hired. He advocates that the government needs to provide food for the people and that the government needs to tax the wealthy. He's done away with They can't figure out how to get, the debt paid without taxing the wealthy, and Necker's brought back. So he's the most important finance minister, and he believes in taxing the wealthy. Eventually, there's going to be a meeting of the Estates General, and this will involve, the first, second, third estate. The third estate knows the gig here. They know when they go to this Estates General, the rich and the church are just going to vote them out, and same old, same old. So this time, when the third estate show up, they show up what's called the Cahiers de Dolences, or the list of grievances, which is a list of things that they want fixed before they will partake in a new government. So they want everyone to be taxed. They want equal rights. The third estate's basically saying, like, we're not playing this game with you. We represent over 90% of the population. You need to meet these demands, or we're going to start a new government. Now, the list of grievances, this is certainly the ideal of the third estate, but it's going to be hard achieving that. The first and second estate don't want to work with them. Through a series of disagreements, eventually the bourgeoisie will partake in what is known as the tennis court oath, which is basically the third estate, or the bourgeoisie, saying, we can't work with the first and second estate. They're not going to give us the republic or the constitutional monarchy that we're looking for. So we're going to create a national assembly, and we're going to create our own government. We'll see what the role of the king in that government's going to be. But the tennis court oath is both a promise that France will have a new democratic government, and then secondly, the establishment of the National Assembly that will work until a new government is established. So those are some important things. As this politicking is going on, a lot of the poorer people in France feel that, same old, same old. We complain, the rich people give us some doggy treats, and we're supposed to feel good about that. They want the third estate, and to a degree, the first and second estate, to know that this is like the real deal. Like, we're not sitting back and taking like a little bit lower taxes. Like, we want an entire upheaval of the system. And, the way that they're going to do this is by rioting in Paris, and specifically by destroying the Bastille. The Bastille was an old French prison, a symbol of French oppression, and they're going to come in, shatter that, actually rip it to the ground. And this becomes really the beginning of the French Revolution. Like, we could maybe say the meeting of the Estates General, but they're still negotiating there. Like, I'm not sure I would call that like revolution yet. But certainly when the Bastille goes down, we've got a revolution going on. So that is kind of that defining moment in the French Revolution on July 14th. Now, when the Bastille goes down, a lot of the people in France feel that the king's going to want some payback, a little reprisal for this riot. And this is called the Great Fear, where people in France feel that Louis is going to turn the army on the people. And this causes rioting throughout, mainly the countryside, certainly in France as well, but some pretty significant rioting. Now, because of this, the nobles will come forward and renounce their nobility. This very dramatic moment on August 4th of 1789. They're going to renounce their nobility. And when that happens, nobility in France is technically dead. Now, that being said, this grand gesture by the nobles to renounce their titles is a little ridiculous in that, like, they're done. The National Assembly has already decided they're getting rid of nobility. Their houses are being burned down left and right during the Great Fear. So, it's like one of those things where your boss is like, I'm going to fire you, and you say, I quit. Like, you're going to get fired. But, maybe it makes you feel better to quit. So that is the Great Fear. The National Assembly has heard the cries of the people, and in a response to this, they are going to create what is known as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, which is going to be kind of the French version of the Declaration of Independence. This will get rid of nobility. It creates equality for all men. It is important for you to understand that the French actually do believe that. You know, when we say all men are created equal in the Declaration of Independence, you know, we well know that, you know, the founding fathers men is all white men are equal. The French do not believe that, you know, so when they say all men are equal, they mean all races. Now, women were not there yet, but I think that is something important to point out about the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Now, there's no real, you know, account for the king. So still to this point, the National Assembly is not 100% certain about what to do with the king. I think they kind of hope that Louis will get on board with this Declaration of Rights and they can bring him into the fold as kind of a constitutional monarch, like what's going on in England. From everything I've read, I think that is the ultimate goal. However, Louis will not acknowledge the document. He will not sign the document. And this will then cause what is known as the March on Versailles, where we're going to have French women go to Versailles, get Louis, bring him back to, you know, Paris and kind of keep a watchful eye on him. You know, I don't think the March on Versailles would be like an enormous talking point if I had some kind of a DBQ on the French Revolution. Like maybe I would use it. But certainly if you have a DBQ that has anything to do with women or feminism, you know, that's a good thing to bring up. You know, they're playing a major role in the revolution, serving the National Assembly. You know, that's certainly, you know, I think I've gone through a bunch of feminist things this year to help you with that possible prompt. But that's just one thing you could think about if you're dealing with this time period. You know, that could help you there. Going down a little bit, you know, after the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, we're also going to have the civil constitution with the clergy. If you just highlight that real quick, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that, but that's basically the French Revolution going to war with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has sided with the rich really since there's been a France. And, you know, whether it's right or wrong, the bourgeoisie feels like it's payback time. You know, like you've been oppressing us all these years, and now, you know, you need to pay for that. And they really do want the Catholic Church to pay. They're going to seize all Catholic Church lands and assets. You know, probably the most famous is Notre Dame, becomes the Temple of Reason. And then they're going to back all of those church goods with, or use those church goods to back what are called assignats. And those are bonds that the government issues, backed by church lands and goods to pay off the French debt. It doesn't work, you know, in classic French tradition. They print way too many assignats, and everyone figures out it's, you know, a scam, and it all comes crashing down. So, you know, it doesn't work, but it was an attempt to kind of get at the church and then also to pay off the debt. It's not going to come up later in these notes because, like I said, I'm just hitting high points here, but some other attacks on the church you might want to think about, you know, the new French calendar where they change all the days of the week so that people don't know what day Sunday is anymore. I think that's you know, if you're looking for some kind of like church or state type thing, that would be a really good one. And then at the end of the French Revolution, you know, Robespierre's, you know, really his final decision is going to be to create, you know, the cult of reason, where he's basically just trying to get rid of Christianity altogether. Which will fail, but, you know, I mean, that's another attack on religion there. So that's some of the stuff with the religion. As we move on, okay, we're going to get into what is called the counter-revolution, or, you know, we could say the violent phase of the French Revolution, where things start to really turn bad. And this really has to do with the war that France is going to fight between Prussia and Austria. Prussia and Austria don't want to see the kings fall off the throne, not because they care a rip about France, but because they don't want to fall off their own thrones. So, long story short, they will declare war on France, or go to war with France is the more accurate thing. The French actually do declare war first. I think the Prussians and Austrians would have done it eventually, but France does declare war. And the party that wants that war is what is called the Jacobin Party. They are kind of running the National Assembly. It'd be like if the Democrats controlled like 80% of the House. You know, that's pretty much what you're dealing with. So the Jacobins, they want war. They're going to get war. And initially, this war does not go well for the French. The Austrians and Prussians are moving in on Paris. They're making all kinds of decrees, you know, like if you hurt the king, we're going to burn Paris, you know, all this stuff. The Brunswick Decree. is certainly one of those things. And, this will lead to what is called the September massacres. And this is really when the French Revolution takes a nasty, nasty turn, where we've got French people just running into prisons and just stabbing nobles and clergy to death in thousands, because they feel there's going to be finger pointing, when the Austrians come in and they go, who, burned your house down? That peasant did it, So the September massacres is really that point where the revolution spins out of control. And, at this point, the Legislative Assembly, could have done more to stop that. That's probably where they should have stepped up and really put an end to that, and they don't do enough. So September massacres, revolution spinning out of control, and it's after the September massacres that Maximilien Robespierre really starts to come into his own. So up until this point, Robespierre's, a revolutionary leader along with a lot of these guys, but he's more of a part of a group. After the September massacres, Robespierre starts to kind of put himself in the leadership role of, this French Revolution situation. So, that's the first time we see him emerge. Eventually, we're going to have the Constitution of 1791 that's going to put together a republic in France that will not involve Louis. One of the big reasons Louis is going to be not allowed to partake in this government is the flight to Varennes. Louis is going to try to escape. He's caught, and this just breaks any bond that the French people and the king of France have. So the flight to Varennes really marks the end of any kind of a constitutional monarchy situation for the French. Now, with Louis XVI's flight to Varennes, we now have the big decision: do you kill the king or do you let the king live? In this debate, the Girondists will formulate in the Legislative Assembly as a group that thinks that the king should not be killed. There's a bunch of reasons for this. First off, they don't feel his actions warrant death. Secondly, they feel that if they kill the king, then they're just going to bring more European pressure on them. The other group, which is also a Jacobin group, is sometimes referred to as the Mountain. This is going to be mainly Danton and Robespierre, and they think the king needs to be killed. And Robespierre's famous quote: "For the revolution to live, the king must die." If the revolution's right, then the king must be wrong. So, they're certainly advocating for the death of the king, and Robespierre will win out in the end. And Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette, will be killed at the guillotine. And when this happens, we begin, the rule of what is sometimes called the Committee of Public Safety. And that's at the bottom of that page there on the Second Revolution. You'll see the Committee of Public Safety there. Make sure you highlight that. And the Committee of Public Safety is going to be carrying out what is called the Reign of Terror. And this is when the French Revolution really just, spins completely out of control. September massacres is the beginning, but then the Reign of Terror is kind of the climax here. And, under the Reign of Terror, what we're going to see is massive amounts of people. Some people think 60, 70,000 people rounded up, taken to the guillotine because they're enemies of the revolution. The law 22 or the law of suspects actually plays into this, where the Committee of Public Safety can arrest you and execute you on suspicion of being anti-revolution. So they don't even have to have any evidence. They just have to suspect you, and they round you up, take you to the guillotine, chop your head off. As this is going on, one of your main culprits here is Jean-Claude Marat. He is a nasty little newspaper writer who's calling for more and more people to get killed. Eventually, a woman named Charlotte Corday is going to stab him to death in the bathtub to try to end his hateful writing. She certainly does, but now she makes Marat the martyr. And actually, she gives some credit to the Committee of Public Safety, because the whole time the Committee of Public Safety is saying, oh, there's this group out there, they're trying to destroy the revolution. And, when Marat's killed, it's like, oh, they're right. There is an underground movement. They got Marat. So it doesn't really work out too well. And in fact, it kind of backs the Committee of Public Safety. Now, the moment when the Committee of Public Safety are really going to come crashing down is Robespierre is going to have Danton arrested and executed, basically for not doing what Robespierre wants. In the end, it becomes all about power for Robespierre, and Danton threatens his power, and he has Danton killed. When he does this, if you're living in France at this time, you need to be concerned about Robespierre, and everyone's kind of discussing about how to get rid of Robespierre. And eventually that will happen. They'll turn on Robespierre and they'll kill Robespierre. And this is known as the Thermidorian reaction. Now, Thermidor is because of that crazy French calendar. The month of July is named Thermidor in the new French calendar. And the Thermidorian reaction is the end of the Reign of Terror. It is not the end of the French Revolution. French Revolution goes on after this. But it is the end of the Reign of Terror, and it's also the end of the Committee of Public Safety. After this, we will have the creation of what is known as, the Directory. Now, the Directory is a government that's designed to replace the Legislative Assembly. A lot of them are part of the Legislative Assembly, and it's a very unpopular government. It's considered to be insanely corrupt. Most people in France think this is just same old with the Directory. And the only way the Directory really can maintain power in France is through the use of the military. So they've got the military on their side. If someone, starts protesting, they can send the military out there, crush them. But that's really how the Directory is holding power. It has nothing to do with loyalty of the people. That's not the case. The leader of the Directory at this time is a guy named Abbé Sace. He wrote What is the Third Estate? He's rode this revolution throughout the entire time, and he's now looking to maybe establish himself as, I don't know, maybe a constitutional monarch, maybe a dictator. You could argue, I guess, probably what Napoleon's going to end up being. And Abbé Sace knows that the only way he can pull this off is with the help of Napoleon. And in the end, Napoleon will stab Abbé Sace in the back, and he will take power for himself. This will end the Directory and will begin the Napoleonic period. All right. So that is the French Revolution. If you've got any questions on the French Revolution, anything you were wondering about, I would be happy to answer any French Revolution questions right now. Okay. If I was thinking about, topics for the French Revolution, certainly one I've already given you. How does the French Revolution, connect to the Enlightenment? Another one might be like, how does the French Revolution impact Europe? So the spreading of democracy, the implementation of Enlightenment ideas, all those different things, you could go with. As far as the French Revolution, like facts go, like Declaration of the Rights of Man, Reign of Terror, Estates General, those would be some key things I would try to focus on. National Assembly, those are your bigger points. So looking at your other note sheet, we're going to quickly do Napoleon and the Congress of Vienna. And I don't like exactly the way this plays out here, so I'm gonna change it up a little bit different than what's going on in your notes. But it'll follow on pretty closely. So, when Napoleon takes control of France, he is going to set up what is called the consulate. He is going to try to preserve the ideas of the revolution, at least initially. So, Napoleon basically says like, hey, we're going to keep the revolution going here. All right. I'm just a president. I'm the first consul. I'm not a dictator. We're going to keep the Directory in place, So he initially, and maybe in his mind, actually thought that maybe he could be like a super powerful president, initially. And he tries to keep the revolution ideals alive. However, this pretty quickly becomes very difficult for Napoleon to do, and he will start to consolidate power in his own authority. And if you flip over your note sheets there, if you skip a paragraph down, I'm going to get into some of the politics here, and then we'll do a couple of little battles. First off, we've got the Concordat of 1801, where Napoleon tells the Catholic Church, like, hey, listen, things have really gotten messed up. I don't know how things got so bad between us. Maybe we could fix that, and, have a better relationship. And he says, I'm happy to pay, all the, paychecks for the Catholic clergy in France is kind of a makeup. I'm sorry for what happened to the Catholic Church during the French Revolution. Also, Napoleon is hoping to use the Pope to get him the title of Holy Roman Emperor, which he will get. The Pope will crown him Holy Roman Emperor, and certainly this Concordat of 1801 is all about that scheming to become emperor. Maybe the most important thing about Napoleon is the Napoleonic Code. I'd love for them to ask about Waterloo or the invasion of Russia or Elba or something cool like that, but they won't. It'll probably be like Napoleonic Code. No, the Napoleonic Code is Napoleon's rewriting of the French Constitution. It will hold a lot of Enlightenment values. So, for instance, the idea of lycées, public education, the test Napoleon, where people can, take a test and Napoleon will pay for your college education as long as you serve the state. He creates the Bank of France to help, grant loans to middle-class people. He is going to preserve freedom of religion. Napoleon's an atheist. He don't care what religion you worship. So a lot of the French ideals will be upheld in the Napoleonic Code. Not all of them will be, though. For instance, freedom of speech. You do not have freedom of speech in France. That's one of the freedoms that you're not allowed to have. You can say what you want. You just can't say anything bad about Napoleon. So there's no freedom of speech. And then also, not that the women of France were getting a ton out of, and actually, I'm going to get back to that in 1 second. They're not getting a ton out of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, but actually the Napoleonic Code is worse for women. They actually take a step back. Maybe Josephine really hurt that situation for women. Speaking of which, and I probably should have covered this earlier, but, talking about women in the French Revolution, Olympia de Gouges, all right, she's not on that note sheet. But keep her in mind, especially keeping with that feminist theme. Declaration of the Rights of Women is her book. She wants equal rights for women. She will be killed during the French Revolution for women's rights. So very important character. Also, you have Pauline Léon, and she wants women to fight in the French army, which, again, she will not succeed in doing that. She's not killed, but she will not succeed doing that. So those are two women that are trying to, improve the conditions of women in France during the Revolution. So I know I skipped back a little bit there, but as soon as I brought up how women were treated in the Napoleonic Code, those two women popped in my mind. So just keep that in your mind as well. Going back up, I'll now do some of his military things. All right. Napoleon is constantly in war with most of Europe. I'm not going to get into the battles he used to conquer most of Europe. I'm just going to mention a couple of his key losses. Battle of Trafalgar. Okay, he's going to lose to Horatio Nelson and the English. This pretty much destroys any hope Napoleon has of invading England. Another massive defeat for Napoleon is his invasion of Russia, where we have the Tsar Alexander I push Napoleon out of Russia. And this will eventually have Napoleon have to give up his power and head to the island of Elba, where he's going to be imprisoned. Napoleon will eventually escape Elba. He will return to France. This is called the 100 Days when he comes back. And, the reason it's called the 100 Days, it only lasts 100 days, So once Napoleon gets back, all his enemies unite against him. And eventually Napoleon will lose at the Battle of Waterloo to Duke Wellington. If you have to know one battle from this time period, it's probably the Battle of Waterloo. If they're going to ask you about one, that is it. And Napoleon's going to lose that. He's going to be sent to Saint Helena, and that's going to be the end of Napoleon. Now, probably the most important thing about Napoleon is, if you're looking down there, I highlighted it in red for you, is the Congress of Vienna. And make sure you highlight Congress of Vienna there. This is super important, and the reason why is both Henderson and I think that, like, comparing two significant treaties from two different time periods is a great way to cover a lot of history in one question. Because like I said, we don't think it's going to be like one specific topic. Because if you want to test people's knowledge, well, then you want to make it a more broad-based question. So maybe like Congress of Vienna to the Peace of Westphalia, or the Treaty of Versailles. Comparing those two might be really significant. So pay close attention to this. I'd say it's the most important thing with Napoleon. Now, when we're dealing with the Congress of Vienna, the key players are going to be Castlereagh of England, all right, Alexander I of Russia, Metternich of Austria, Clemens von Metternich. He's probably your most important because he's going to end up running this thing. And then Talleyrand from France. Those are our heavy hitters at the Congress of Vienna. Now, the thought was, and Talleyrand is a big part of this, that if you punish France, obviously it's very tempting to punish France. Napoleon's ripped through Europe. He's caused maybe the death of 2 to 3 million people, and it's very easy to get super angry and make Napoleon pay for that. But Talleyrand says, if you do that, if you crack down on France super hard and put all these economic sanctions and take a bunch of land from them, all you're going to do is create a super angry France that's going to be looking to fight a war a couple years later and get all that stuff back. And they eventually decide to treat France pretty gently in this. France is basically, required to return to its original pre-revolution borders, and then they have to pay a little bit of money, but not much. And the reason this is super significant is we're going to go almost 100 years without a major war in France because of what they're going to do here, or a major war in Europe, because of what they're going to do here with France. Whereas in the Versailles Peace Treaty, we're looking at a complete and utter destruction of Germany, which is going to cause Germany to be back in war in 30 years. So, there's certainly a comparison there between Congress of Vienna and Versailles. Now, the other thing that's important about the Congress of Vienna, and maybe the most important thing, is this is considered to be a victory for conservatives. So, during this time period, we have conservatives who, they want everything to stay the same. Nobles, church in control, king on the throne, nothing changes. Liberals want things to change. They'd like to see a republic. They like to see freedom of religion. Really, if there's any change happening, and you're advocating for it, you're a liberal. The Congress of Vienna is considered to be a victory for conservatives, in that kings are returned to the throne. Louis XVIII is put back on the throne when Napoleon is removed. So this is a victory for conservatives. Liberals do not win out in this. Also, Poland is going to be split up between Germany and what is Prussia and Russia. So we have that. Netherlands and Belgium are created as little buffer states between France and the Germanic states there. So those are some key things. And let me think if there's anything else about the Congress. Oh, some mistakes that were made there too. There were countries that could have been split up, and there were countries that could have been put together. So, for instance, could have put Italy and Germany together. Like, you're just redrawing the map. Put all the Germans in one country, put all the Italians in one country. They don't do it. Countries probably should have been split up, like Austria. It's a multicultural nightmare there. You got Poles and Czechs and Slavs and Italians and Germans. They don't split it up, probably because Metternich's running the show. Also, Russia, another country that probably should be split up, not split up. So there are some key mistakes there as well. The last thing that I want to mention is the Quadruple Alliance, or sometimes known as the Concert of Europe. And what this is an agreement between all these countries that say if one country comes out and starts getting super aggressive and starts trying to conquer all the other countries, then we're all going to come in together and we are going to destroy that country and keep a balance of power in Europe. That balance of power is important. So that's probably the last factor of the Congress of Vienna that I wanted to bring up. I'm looking here to see. No, I don't think I missed anything. Any questions on Napoleon at all? Okay. Well, that's all I got for you today. Friday, I will do another one around this time, 12:30, 1 o'clock. And I will be doing the Industrial Revolution and like isms, which I know is just savagely brutal. But, we're looking at like conservatism, liberalism, socialism, corn laws, all that kind of stuff. So, as horrible as that is, it might be the most important review for you to attend because it's so horrible. You don't remember any of that stuff. French Revolution, you'll probably remember it. Napoleon, you'll probably remember it. But that kind of stuff, people struggle with that. So that'll be a good review. And later on today, I'll be putting up another DBQ on the evolution of the situation of the poor throughout Europe. This is another one where like you can go through different centuries and look at the poor and kind of run through history that way. So that's another one that I think like maybe they might go down that road because you can cover a lot of history with that question. So I'm going to post that. And don't forget that like if you didn't do DBQ1 or you didn't do DBQ2, don't think that that's over. Okay, you can turn that in whenever you want. I will grade you for it. I will lift your average for it. I'll give you feedback on it whenever you want to turn it in. One thing I ask, if you're turning in a late DBQ, if you could just send me like an email or just a quick one, like turned in DBQ1, because I'm not going back and looking at old assignments all the time to see like if people randomly decided to turn it in. So if you could give me a heads up on that, then I'll give you feedback way quicker than if like I haven't checked an assignment from 3 weeks ago and now I'm looking and I'm like, oh, they turned it in. So that might be a little bit slower on the response time. So that's all I got for you. I appreciate those of you that are showing up. If you are in contact with any of your friends that are taking the test and are not showing up, please ask them, to pop in. I know the group that we have here, and last time we had I think 14 or 15 on there. I feel like you guys are going to do great. I'm just worried about the rest. So if you want to stick around and ask me any questions after everyone leaves, have at it. But that's all I got for you. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for showing up. All right. And I'm alone.